When we look at the COP report, okay, here we are looking at the non-commercials, and this is the thing that interested me, all right, is that I think we talked about the last week or so. We talked about 2 weeks ago how there was like literally no trading here, just like the volatility in the COT report for sterling had completely evaporated, and then we'd start to see basically sterling start to slide. Now, the interesting thing for me here is if we look at British pound sterling on the non-commercials, okay, on the non-commercials who have been, all right, who have been long. Look at where we are now. All right. And a lot of that is because look at that. They've trimmed 7,000 longs and added 21,400 shorts. That's a big change. All right. Look at that. The net positions are, is changing massively. All right. That is, we talked about this last week where we're going to get a flip in the COT report. And it looks like, we were right on that. And it would also explain, an awful lot of selling that we saw in sterling last week. Okay. Remember, we're looking at this on Tuesday, but this is data that came out last Tuesday or was collected last Tuesday, reported last Friday, and we're looking at it here today. And so it gives us an opportunity to sort of look at, how sterling has done last week, and it was pretty woeful, by sterling ways. All right, so we just you want to be keeping an eye on that. So with that in mind, I'm also going to be looking at euro, right? Based upon, I'll be intrigued to see what next week's COT report is based on what gets reported this afternoon and then gets expressed on Friday. But if we look at that, even last week, right, there were 6,000 buys, 9,000 shorts, all right. So it's kind of net positions, all right, 125,000 to the long. But I wonder if, as I said, if that's going to change over the next week or two and stuff. It's going to be, I'll be intrigued to see what carries on there. When we look at sterling, then, okay, in particular, so as I said, we've just looked at the non-commercials, 21,000 shorts, added 7,000 longs cut, all right. Commercials, okay, the big boys, all right. What's happening there? They've added 18,000 longs, trimmed 13,000 shorts. Look at that. And that's what we're seeing. Even the small speculators, okay, they are drifting short, okay. They are basically, you can see there the trimmed longs, added shorts, all right, the small boys. But you can see that we said about last week we were looking to flip, all right. And so we will have to wait and see what, how that carries on with sterling. As I said, sterling's had a little bit of a bump yesterday and today, but I think a lot of that is just basically is to do with anti-euro sentiment, okay, over the last 48 hours off the back of that shocker of a deal. Question becomes, right, well, how does that carry on and stuff? But I said, that's what's happening. That's what's saying. It's not terribly great for for sterling in terms of the kind of, let's say, the longer term bullish trend. But hey, we're traders. Ultimately, all we really care about is, where's the stage 2 trend is where's there a trend that where's the strength and the weakness that we can sort of take advantage of. And then let's finish with sterling, shall we? All right. So boom, boom, boom. Let's bring these up again. So here we go. Sterling, cable, euro sterling, pound Aussie, pound CAD, FTSE, pound New Zealand, pound Swiss, pound yen. Okay, there we go. That's what we're looking at. So let's have a look at pound against dollar. Listen, let's just go up to the monthly, shall we? That is looking like it could be a big bearish key reversal there, doesn't it? Now, as I said, we've still got a couple of days going, so don't get all excited. So, but at the moment, if this was the last day of the month, the last hour or two, that would be a bearish key reversal, pound against dollar. You'd want to keep an eye on that. That would be telling of dollar, America coming out of its tariff, shenanigans, and sterling starting to come off the rails. All right, you're basically just generally the UK coming off the rails. So, I would look at this as bang. What interests me here is that we had a Vulcan here, okay? This was a Vulcan. This is a weekly Vulcan, basically. We broke it. We broke the VB, came back in, put in a really lovely PIMOT, and we're working our way down. And, I'm going to watch to see, do we finish this week? Does it close the other side of the 20 or does it bounce off the 20? If it's closing the other side of the 20, well, then I'm looking for us to move lower there, okay? And really, then you'd be looking for us to move back towards 130. That's what I would be That's what I'd be looking for. Okay, there's not really any good news coming out of the not good, any good news coming out of the UK. All right. So yeah, that's what I'll be looking there. Daily chart. Yeah, well, I had a short here. Okay, Vulcan. This was a daily Vulcan. All right, a daily Vulcan down back down to the 50 to the lows here and stuff. We bounced off. It's done nicely, and yeah, we look at that. We couldn't get the 20. Just as always, the 20 bit of PO20. It's support. It's support. It's support. Oh no, no, it's not support. It's turning over, rolling over, comes up there, bounces off there. That is a bearish key reversal there at the 20 as it's sloping down. What a hey presto, we've sort of drifted our way down there. That's that's a lovely move. All right, so pound against yen, pound against yen, it's just yeah, there's nothing really terribly exciting there. Having had that run there, last week was that kind of doji. This week is looking the same. Now, of course, that could change if there's like a change of prime minister in Japan, if there's something magical comes out of the Bank of Japan meeting, that could change. But if I look at that at the moment, it's just it's just coiling up there. It's getting quiet. It's not doing anything. All right, until maybe after towards the end of the week. And remember, also some of that will also come out of the if there is a US Japan deal as well. That's what that's reflecting. Kind of what is looking at pound against Swiss franc. Okay, so of course, we've talked about this a lot about how this move down here was a reflection of sterling weakness, Swiss franc strength. Okay, that's what we're looking at. It's kind of a nice move. We go down to the daily chart. It's just been a nice move. But we made new lows. Right, we made new lows. There's the VB, and you have to wonder whether maybe because we've just seen against the dollar, maybe Swiss franc. Okay, a bit of risk on madness, and we start to get a little bit of a change in that. Let's go down to the 4-hour chart. Certainly, we opened on the lows and we've tried to push our way up. There's the VB, all right, which is also previous week's high. I'd be interested to see whether, if there is a risk on rally, whether it pushes its way through, whether it pushes its way through that. Euro against sterling. Well, we looked at euro there before. Listen, that has been a great trend, but bang! Look at yesterday's. That is a big engulfing candle, key reversal candle. That's that's a trend ender. All right, now of course it's only because it's against sterling, which might but I think we there's the high, there's the VB, isn't it? All right, that's the VB on it. So we are kind of close to that as we are. A break of that starts to change the sentiment on that. All right. Pound against CAD, daily chart, pound against CAD here is just, that has just been a bit of CAD strength and sterling weakness there, hasn't it? That's where we are with that. Pound against Aussie has been a little bit of Aussie strength as sterling has weakened. As sterling has weakened, Aussie has strengthened a bit like the Canadian dollar there. Okay, it's just worked its way down there. The Aussie is doing better against the sterling than the Aussie rugby team's doing better against the Lions. But there we go. We'll just leave that there, shall we? Kind of intriguingly, pound against New Zealand dollar. Let's finish off with this monthly chart. All right, you can see for the last 2 years, it's scruffy at times, but it's stayed above that 20, hasn't it? It's just stayed above it, just worked its way. We had this big flash out there, okay, in the kind of liberation day. But then if you look at it, where the monthly's tagging the 8, it's just inside bar at the moment. It's another inside bar. We've talked about this a bit in that if we go down to the weekly chart, it's coiling up on the weekly. Now that could just be getting ready for everybody to go off on the summer holidays, admittedly. But it's just we've had that big flush that gave us that huge big weekly bearish key reversal. All right, and then we broke the VB. The VB of that high was here, which we've kind of broken it. We've broken it, and every high now is lower, isn't it? And it looks to me like we're coiling up a little bit. If we go down to the daily chart, get down to the daily chart, it's just reflecting that, isn't it? It's at the bottom of this level, okay? You'd probably expecting sterling to weaken and Kiwi dollar to, if not strengthen, at least hold, which would mean us moving down. So I wonder whether we'll flush down to the 200 and it would not surprise me if we flush down, then we get a response which basically scares out the breakout traders, and then we get the real trend. That's what a scenario I'm looking at there on the pound against the New Zealand dollar. But yeah, you can keep an eye on that and stuff and see how it plays out. Okay, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you found that useful. Hope that's given you a little bit of insight, a little bit of help. As always, I wish you the best of success in your own trading. For those of you, the next Monday will be the last Monday market update before the break, and next Tuesday will be the last stage 2 weekly call before the break as well. So put that in your diary. Have a great week. It's going to be a busy week, so maintain a good eye on the news flow, the order flow, and as always, your risk management. And I will speak to you soon. Cheers.